recruiter for Great Television, and I'm honored to lead the discussion with Etan Thomas. If you have questions, we want you to use the Q&A feature and write your questions there, and we will get to your questions. But right now, we're just going to have a fireside chat with Brother Etan. So first of all, thanks for saying yes to this. I'm just read your background and just excited to talk to you. First of all, talk to us about your childhood. You were raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Talk to us about your childhood.
So, I was born in Harlem, and then I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma when I was younger. Then I got transferred to American Airlines. And, in Tulsa, that's where I just kind of, found my voice. I was young, like in middle school. And, just being around, and it's interesting because once you find your voice and you start being aware of different things around you, it's like you look at the world differently and you see things differently. And that happened to me at a very young age. So it just so happened that I was finding my voice and I was also playing ball at the same time. So, I was kind of doing both. But it's interesting, you talk to people who knew me kind of growing up from middle school and high school, they're like, oh yeah, he's always been like that. You know what I mean? Always talking about something, always standing up for something. And it's kind of true. That's kind of always been, who I was. And my mother gave me books to read. My mother's a school teacher. So whenever your mother's a school teacher, you just have extra reading to do in the summer for no reason. You know what I mean? That's just book reports or something like that. So she would give me these books to read, and I have to write book reports on them. But they would be of like Bill Russell and of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and of Muhammad Ali and these things it interests me how they stood up for different causes. They were these wonderful athletes in their respective sports, but then they were standing up for all these different things. And I just found it just really fascinating. So that was the type of athlete that I wanted to become from an early age. So that just kind of continued from there.
Wow. And that is so interesting that you knew at an early age that you wanted to use your voice for impact and things like that. I guess so. Talk to me from middle school and high school, when you knew you needed to use your voice. Can you describe a time when you did use your voice in middle school and high school, and you say, wow, this thing works, that if I do raise my voice, results can happen. Do you know of an instance like that?
Oh, definitely. So I remember being in middle school, and I remember the Rodney King verdicts happened. Rodney King, now we didn't have social media and we didn't have cell phones and stuff like that. So, y'all kind of see it all the time. We didn't see it like that. So when the Rodney King tape came out and it was played on the news, everybody was like in shock, like, oh my gosh, do you see how they're beating this guy, right? But then the cops went on trial and they were all found not guilty. A time period passed. And when that happened, we were just in shock. We were like, wait a minute, what do you mean not guilty? Like, how is that possible? So, I started writing about it and just talking about it. And I got into speech and debate at a young age. And so I read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was like in the 7th grade. So, I wanted to write about things like Malcolm did and talk about controversial subjects like Malcolm did and make points like Malcolm did. So I started doing that, and I just started doing it a lot, did it in front of the school, talked to different people. And I remember it, we had y'all don't remember this, none of the students, but we had this thing called DARE program. And do you remember that? So the police would come in there and they would talk to you and it was one time I just started firing away questions at them. You know what I mean? Like, well, what about this? Well, how come police don't get, held accountable when they do this? Well, how do you, and it was like, boom, 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 boom. And he didn't have answers for my questions. And so everybody was kind of like looking like, wow, like he's questioning the police, but it's just something that you would never really did. And, the fact that he didn't have the answers for me made me realize how much bigger of a problem and an issue it really was. And then of course, more started looking around and say like things like Rodney King happened all the time. We just didn't hear about it. And so, that just kind of fueled my fire from that point on.
Wow. Did you get any pushback from teachers and principals or anything like that and say, why are you being a troublemaker or anything like that? Talk to me about that.
Well, definitely, sometimes teachers didn't really like my, position. Then I learned about John Carlos and Tommy Smith, doing the Black Power salute during the 1968 Olympics. So then I started doing that during the national anthem. And I don't even know if they even still do that, but we had to get up there and say the Pledge of Allegiance before class and everything like that, before assembly and that. So I started, doing the Black Power salute, and then other people started doing it with me. So some of the teachers didn't really like that too much, but then we had to have a, back and forth of why I was doing it and what it meant and how, the things that are promised in the national anthem or in the Star Spangled Banner isn't really given to everybody. And so we started having that whole full back and forth. And it was interesting because some teachers, now not all, but some teachers were like, you know what? I never thought of it like that from somebody else's perspective. Now in Oklahoma, we had a lot of Native Americans as well. So they kind of joined with us. They're like, yeah, we ain't saying no national anthem. That doesn't apply to us. And they were like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that as either. So it was just, it was learning how, different groups can also find commonality at a very young age. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because in middle school, everybody kind of sticks to their tribe, kind of, but then once you start finding commonality, you start working together, and it just kind of continued all through high school.
Yeah. I'm curious. I guess Black Wall Street there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I guess were you introduced to that and knowing the culture and the history right there in your own backyard?
So interestingly enough, that my middle school, Carver Middle School, was literally 8 minutes away from where Black Wall Street was. So we grew up knowing about it. We grew up, learning everything like that. We knew the ins and outs. I was surprised when I went to Syracuse. I was surprised that so many people didn't know about it. Like, I was like, wait, y'all don't know what happened? You know what I mean? How is that possible? Because really just people started learning about Black Wall Street like a few years ago. There's a few movies it was depicted on. It was the Watchmen on HBO. It was depicted, and then a few people started reading about it. So that was just a few years ago, but I grew up with that. And so it kind of placed everything in a different, like in a different sphere as far as, like right now where there's a big issue with CRT and them not wanting to teach certain things, but there was a direct linkage of why certain things were the way they were in Tulsa, where I grew up, and from Black Wall Street. So after they burned it all down, they tried to rebuild it. Then they built a highway right through it, so you couldn't really rebuild. Like all of the structural things that happened that influenced the entire area, so that it didn't become what it was before. You know what I mean? And it's not just when people talk about racism, not just one person doesn't like the other person. No. It's not that. It's structural racism, where it's built into the way that the city is operating, from an educational perspective, from real estate to business to everything. So, which is really crazy for someone not to want young kids to learn that. Do you know what I mean? Because I just wrote a book called Police Brutality and White Supremacy: The Fight Against American Traditions. And so, and one of the people that I interviewed in this one was Tim Wise. He's an educator, and he talked about how, as a white man, he constantly has to reteach the way that people observe why things are the way they are in the country. Because the thought is, if you watch whatever news station you watch, you might think, well, if you work, these people didn't work hard, and that's why they're in the position that they are in. And he's like, well, wait a minute, let's go back a few decades and see what happened, and why there is a cycle of poverty, why there's no economic growth in this area, why there's, you know what I mean? So it goes into that a lot deeper, and it's just beyond me that the educational system doesn't want to teach that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. Talk to me about basketball, your love of basketball. When did that start? And, when did you say that, hey, because, when you talk to a middle schooler, what do you want to be? I want to be an NBA player. I want to be a football player. So were you one of those kids in middle school? What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an NBA player.
Well, I liked basketball, but I wasn't really that good, when I was young. So I I liked, my grandfather, I would always take me to the parks in New York, and I was tall, but I couldn't hang with the guys, you know what I mean? So, I'm sitting there watching, I'm learning, I'm going to Rucker Park, I'm going, watching, usually with young kids, you just have to sit down and watch until it's time for you to play, then, something like that. But I did a lot of watching and learning. And, it's interesting because one of the things that I always saw was that there was so much talent, but there was so much wasted talent. So I always tell young people, I was just talking to a high school a few days ago, and I was telling them this as well. I was like, listen, I was blessed to play 11 years in the NBA, but I could easily name you 20 guys that I grew up around that should have been in the NBA way before me, but just made different choices and different decisions and stuff like that. But as far as talent, they were way better than me, not even close. You know what I mean? And I knew guys that, one of the things that happened in Tulsa, where we had, gangs became really popular and in like the 90s. So a lot of the gangs would move there from LA, and they would come to places like Tulsa and Little Rock, Arkansas, and different places in Texas, and they would set up shop. So we had Hoover Crips, neighborhood Crips, Pyrus. Wasn't no Hoover Street in Tulsa. That's LA. You know what I mean? But we had a whole cast that ride or die for Hoover Crip. And so I knew cats that could hoop, that were good. They just went a different direction. And it was always tough to see, but it was like telling young people that, wasted talent is the worst thing in the world. Like, you could do so much. And we were all in a situation where we didn't have a lot of money. My mother was a school teacher. Parents got divorced, so single parent household, everything like that. So I didn't have money growing up, but it's like you make choices and you either go this way or that way. And, a lot of guys went the other way.
Yeah. And speaking about the other way, were you ever approached to join one of those gangs when you were growing up there in Tulsa?
No, interestingly, I wasn't, and it's interesting because it's, it's like you're tempted with things that are going to be appealing to you. Gangs was never appealing to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's not something that was like, my thing was more of, there would be a racial incident or something with the police or something like that I was like, oh, wait a minute, why is this happening? That was something that I would always see. So when I tell stories when I was growing up, you would think that you're like, wait, did you grow up in the 60s? I'm like, no, it wasn't in the 60s. It's just that's how it works. The things that put in your path that could trip you up based on, the things that would get your attention. And for me, it never was gangs.
Good. Yeah, you probably were too tall. They probably say, we're not going to mess with him. He's too tall. Yeah, question for you. I wanted to just bring this up, since your mom was a school teacher and we always know you're a student athlete, right? You're a student first and then an athlete. Talk to me about maintaining your grades while being an athlete and the discipline and everything that you had to do to maintain good grades while being an athlete, a student athlete. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so my mother had a different approach with me, and she was a school teacher. So one of the things that my mother would do is she finds ways to be able to inspire each of her students, and they're all in different ways. You know what I mean? So what way you work with one student, would be something completely different with another student. So with me, it was like I was getting like double education. It was like education in school and education at home. And she's feeding me different books to read. Like, this is what you need to read. So you're seeing this that you read, because I had said I read about Malcolm X. So then you're questioning everything. Well, why am I being taught this? Well, what is this? So she would say, okay, you read this. Now I want you to read this and compare and contrast. And then now you can see which one and why. Ask yourself why you're being taught that over here, but not this over here. Do you know what I mean? So she took that approach with me, and it just worked. That's the only way I can say it. It sparked the interest. It sparked everything, because before I was resistant. I was like, I don't need to learn this. You know what I mean? Like this, they're giving me that. Why am I only learning about European history? I don't learn anything about my own history, my own heritage, anything like that. She was like,
why do I need trigonometry? Why do I need trigonometry and calculus, right? Yeah.
Wow. So,
That's good. That's good. So talk to me about an instant that changed your life. You were popular, playing basketball, and then all of a sudden you got pulled over by police. Talk to me about that. And I guess, and I don't know if that was your first encounter with police, but I guess I was reading when they said that you look familiar. And I must have seen you on a mugshot.
Yeah, so you
Talk
did
to
your
me
homework.
about that. Yeah, talk to me about that and what went through your mind and how that set you up to be the man you are today.
So I was in high school. I was on my way to a big rival game. We was playing Central High School. That's a big rival in Tulsa, Booker T and Central. And so I'm driving, and the police stopped me. And I'm pulling right into Pine and Peoria. Y'all don't know Pine and Peoria, but that's the main place in Tulsa. So I'm pulling over in Pine and Peoria, and police stopped me. So one of the things that would happen back in the 90s is that, you know, the police would stop young black men, and you just have to wait for a little bit. The backup would come, then the backup to the backup would come while you're just sitting there waiting. Lights flash and everything like that. They would usually make you get out and have you sit on the ground. That was just like routine. Like you knew that was going to probably happen. So, you know, I'm sitting there, and I'm 16-year-old kid, you know what I mean? Kind of scared, you know, all these policemen, you got 6 policemen, you know, standing over me, one standing close to me with his hand, like on his, like by his holster, like right by it, or where his gun is, just looking at me, you know, I'm sitting on the ground. They're saying, okay, run his plates again. He looks familiar. I've seen him somewhere before. Are you sure? Nothing? Okay, yeah, run it again. I remember his face. His face looks familiar. So I could hear them all talking, right? So, you know, cars are going by, and you know how people do when they see somebody pulled over and they're driving, everybody stops and looks, you know what I mean? So I was all embarrassed, feeling all these eyes on me, everything like that. So I'm sitting there, and it's like 45 minutes are going by. I'm just sitting there, and they're just going through everything. I hear them talking and everything like that. So at one point they told me to pop the trunk. And I said, I was like, well, don't you need a warrant or something like that for that? And the way they all turned and looked at me, I like literally jumped. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, go ahead. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to sit there and argue. I was like, go ahead. So they opened the trunk, and then they saw my Booker T. Washington duffel bag. And they said, oh, he plays for Booker T. Washington High School. That's where we know him from. And so they just closed everything like that. They all got in their cars, and one of them, you know, tapped me on the shoulder and said, stay out of trouble. So I'm like thinking, like, stay out of trouble. That's it? You ain't gonna apologize? You ain't gonna get me on the ground sitting here for 45 minutes, man? I'm late to my game, like all this different stuff, right? So I go to the game, and I'm pissed. Like, I'm so upset, and I couldn't even focus. Like, I walked in while Coach Harris was actually talking. Coach Harris was my high school coach. While he was actually talking, and he was like looking like, how are you just getting here? And I was, you know, but he saw something was wrong, and I couldn't even focus. I think I fouled out all quick in the game. Didn't sleep that night. Like, I saw every single hour, you know what I mean? And, you know, I went to school the next day. I didn't want to go to school. I had one of those mothers that unless something was falling off, you know what I mean, you're going to school. And so I didn't tell her everything that was going on. So I went to school, and I'm in speech and debate class. So I remember I'm sitting there, and you know, recanting everything to this girl who was sitting next to me. I remember the girl, Brandy, little white girl. She's sitting there looking at me like this. I'm like, yeah, they did that to me because I'm black, and they pulled me over and all this. So I'm talking and talking and talking, right? So my teacher, Mr. Bland, tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, come here real quick. Let me come back to my office. Let me talk to you. And so he was like, you know, I've been listening to you tell the story of, I guess, what happened to you. He was like, why don't you make that your OO? And OO is original oratory. If anybody is speech and debate nerds like I was, you know what I mean? So that's your original oratory, is when you make a speech. And standard oratory is when you're reciting somebody else's speech. So I was like, I'm not thinking about writing no speech about this. I'm pissed. You know, all this stuff happened. And he said, he got me with this line. He said, well, listen, I hear you all the time quoting Malcolm X, talking about all this stuff, even when Malcolm X ain't got nothing to do with the conversation. He was like, but now is your time to use your voice and talk about something that happened specifically to you. And I was like, okay. So I went home that night, wrote the whole thing, like it was just pouring out. And I started I started performing it everywhere, all around Tulsa, winning a lot of speech tournaments. I took it nationally because I, was qualifying for national. I took it all the way to Harvard, like it would look everywhere. But I got a lot of attention from it. The newspapers wrote about it. They did a story about it and on the news, everything like that. And so I got a letter sent to me by the Tulsa Police Department up to the school, and they were saying that they're going to look into the situation. Now, I don't know whatever came of that, but for a 16-year-old kid, for them to even just acknowledge it, that was like big for me. So then a lot of guys around the neighborhood was like, hey man, thank you for saying that and speaking up the way you speaking. They'll listen to you. That happens all the time. They ain't gonna listen to us, but they'll listen to you. You say it. So I was like, so then it was like that, that aha moment. I'm like, oh snap. So they just can hear me just because I play ball. And then that's when like the light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, so that's how like Muhammad Ali and that's how, Kareem and Bill Russell and everything. So then I just kind of kept doing it from there. But that was the moment that really, changed everything for me, where I really found my voice.
Wow, that's good. And what did they pull you over for?
Oh, they didn't really give me a reason. They just said that I looked suspicious. I mean, I looked, wow. They didn't need, and the thing is, they don't necessarily have to even give you a reason. I mean, like it's like we suspected you of something. That's all they, and anybody that's gotten pulled over, everybody, participants and everyone, they might have heard that before. They just, and of course they can make up a story and say, well, there was something that happened and we're just, anything. But basically it's just because we wanted to pull you over.
And still no apology to this day.
No apology. But the thing about it is, if I would have reacted in the way that I felt that I would have been justified in reacting by going off on all the policemen, you know what I mean? I probably wouldn't be here right now talking to you, because remember I told you there was a policeman who was just sitting there with his hand literally outside of his holster, waiting for me to make any kind of sudden move or anything. And I can, like when you're looking this way, but you can feel somebody's eyes like just on you. That's the way he was. Like his eyes never went off me. So it's like, and it was a level of self-control that wasn't easy because I was pissed. You know what I mean? So,
and I want, did your mother have that conversation with you? Because we talked to parents, she had that conversation with you that if you pulled up, gotcha.
Definitely.
So talk to me about your decision to attend Syracuse University. They come looking for you, or how did you decide Syracuse University?
Well, being born in New York and spending all my summers in New York and having all family, I spent a lot of time in New York watching the Big East tournament in particular. So going down to Madison Square Garden, watching, different guys, Georgetown and Syracuse and Villanova and UConn, those are like the good old days. So I grew up loving, it was like a style that the Big East had that was different. It's different than like the Pac-10. It's different. Yeah, there we go. There you go, right there. Yeah, it was just different. It was this rugged style, and I just loved it. So I knew I wanted to play ball in the Big East. But yeah, it was always Big East for me.
Wow, good. So when you got to Syracuse, I know since the light bulb went off about using your voice. Talk to me about when you used your voice at Syracuse when you were a freshman, and I guess police officers were using pepper spray. And talk to me about when you used your voice there as a freshman. That you just
all the way prepared. All my business. So my freshman year, this was really like the first or second day of school. There was this big demonstration on campus, and it was the topic was that they were just allowing campus security to use pepper spray, and the fear was that they were going to use pepper spray on all the Black and brown students. Whenever anything happened, any kind of commotion, any kind of argument, anything like that, pepper spray everybody. Now, listening to them all, and like the speakers speak and everything, and they were like, the white students, the white fraternities, the white frats all down frat row, they can do what they want to. They can have parties in the middle of the night, be drunk, be, throwing up, be all kind of stuff, kegs of beer, all that. Police won't bother them. They're like, for our little parties, you know what I mean? They'll come and break it up. And if they see any kind of commotion, pepper spray everybody else. So I'm listening. I'm like, well, that's not right. What's going on? So I'm standing there in the middle of the rally and the demonstration next to this other football player. If you remember Roland Williams, he actually won a Super Bowl. But he was an upperclassman. I think he was a junior at that time. I was a freshman. So we're standing next to each other, big, you know what I mean? I'm all tall. He's a big football player. So we stick out. And the newspaper took a picture of all of the entire demonstration. And there was this young sister with this microphone, and you just saw me and him. So it looked like we were like leading the rally. You know what I mean? When we were part of it, but we weren't leading it. So I was on the front page the next day of the Syracuse paper, right? So the next day was when I was supposed to go in there and talk to all the coaches and stuff like that. So Coach Boeheim, we're coming in, and he said, "Hey, Etan, come here for a second." And I said, "Hey," he's like, "Oh, I saw you in the papers already." And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Well, listen, we know about you when we were recruiting you. We've heard your speech and debate. We know what you're all about." He's like, "Well, I'm just gonna get." He's like, "And I would never tell you not to speak your mind or anything like that, but I am going to tell you this: be prepared to defend yourself against all the backlash." Mm-hmm. He's like, "So as long as you can defend yourself eloquently and you can, stand on your position and you think it through before you speak out, you'll have no problems from me." And he gave me that, that kind of vote of confidence in the beginning, that I wouldn't get any resistance from him. So later on, I found out that wasn't like that on all college campuses. You know what I mean? Especially with football players. Football players are a kind of different thing. They kind of want you to keep your head down, and they'll say, but that was my experience in Syracuse. So yeah, no, it just kind of, I kept going, well, all through my 4 years there.
So did the issue get resolved with the pepper spray?
So it took a lot,
okay.
And they started having a student review board if there was a complaint. So they wanted to have some of the students be involved, kind of like a civilian review board that they have in New York and different places. They don't have them everywhere, but certain places. So they started having that, and that was kind of like the compromise. But it was, yeah, I don't know what you say.
And I guess that's where the birth of, because you're known as the activist athlete. So, yeah. So I guess, did you feel empowered by again, this is what happens when you use your voice, and were you able to rally other people, other college students to be on your side? Talk to me about that, about how you used your voice and your influence to gather other people to be focused and to fight a cause.
Right. Well, when you do stand up on something, first of all, you have to always be expecting that everybody's not going to agree with you, and you have to be okay with that. And I was okay with some people not agreeing with some of the things that I stood up for, and that was fine, no problem at all. But yeah, reaching out to different. There was an incident that happened in Syracuse. I think this was my sophomore, junior. I don't remember when. But these all of these Chinese students got beat up at this Denny's, and it was a big thing, and they was having like a big program, and then they all went out to Denny's afterwards, and there was something happened with the police, and then they got beat up. It was all this big thing, right? So I was, kind of like, all right, let's use this opportunity to stand with them. You know what I mean? To maybe, because then we stand with them, and then they stand with us when we're protesting something, and try to build that, because remember I told you back in middle school, I started doing that with Native American groups, and we did that all through high school. So we was like kind of like this. And so we started doing that with the Asian community there. And, it really formed this bond for a little while. And they were coming to our events. We were coming to their events. And it was real. Now, I don't know how much it continued after, my group left, but for that time period, it was good to see the unity. Do you know what I mean? And it was something where some of the people were a little bit more open to it because an athlete was saying it. And I did see that. And the thing about it is, when you're an athlete, you do have a level of influence more than regular students. That's just the way that it is. And you could either use that power for good or use it for bad. That's basically, and there's a whole lot of ways. I don't even have to go over the ways that you can use it for bad. But you can use it.
Wow. And you did use it. Wow, that's good. So tell me, how can college campuses, specifically predominantly white institutions, become more aware of the issues that are occurring around the country and how they may impact students right on campus? Because there is a lot going on in the world. So, so talk to us, because we do have some college students on the call. Talk to us about that.
Well, the main thing that I always say when I ask this question is that there's strength in numbers. And, that's where organizing and uniting with different groups, because in all colleges, there's like 35, 50 different groups, you know what I mean? Different small organizations. And they all work kind of independently on what is specific to them. But being able to find common ground with something and everybody getting one accord, I mean, I've seen it happen on different college campuses. I remember, and I wrote about it in We Matter on OU's campus. It was Oklahoma University. A few years ago, there was this white fraternity they were on video singing this racist song. They was going through campus, and it was viral and all this thing. And so all these people were like, wait a minute, this cannot go on our campus. So you saw all these different groups uniting, and they united with the football team. And then once they all stood on one accord, you saw some change like immediately. Like they what did they do? Identified the people. They held them on this board, a review, everything like that. Boom, 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 boom. But nothing happened before they were all there united. There was also a case that happened in, I think it was Missouri, where the president was letting all of these racial incidents go that were happening on campus. And I talk about it in the book as well. And it was like, I don't know if y'all saw the movie Higher Learning, but it was like Higher Learning on the campus. Like there was just stuff happening all over the place. And they were trying to get the president to do something, but he just wasn't paying any attention to it. You know what I mean? There was no, but then they united with different groups, united with different athletes and everything like that. And it was amazing because, he was brought up on review just like that. And so I've seen it happen. There's case after case where, when you unite and there's strength in numbers, you can get a lot of things done on campus.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you brought up a good point, unification. And then also when your coach told you that you are going to have to learn how to defend what you're standing up for. Talk to me about the importance of linguistics, right? Being able to verbalize and really talk about what's in your head and how it can come out clearly to be effective. Talk to me about that process and the importance of making sure you can verbalize your stance so it can make sense.
Oh, it's definitely important. And that's just the, speech and debate background that I have that kind of, prepared me to do that. But yes, I mean, every time I write something now, every time I, from when I was younger to the current, I mean, when somebody is dedicated to misrepresenting your position, their first tactic is to, tear you down personally. And the way that we debate now is not actually debating. When somebody disagrees with you, they try to make you look like you don't know what you're talking about. And that's the easiest way to kind of kill the message. You're kind of killing the messenger and making the messenger look like they're speaking out of turn, like they're not qualified to speak about what they're speaking about, no matter what the topic is. And that happens both on the left and the right. That's not just the thing that the right does by themselves. The left does that as well. And, and I always say, that everybody applauds athletes when they speak out on something until they disagree with them. Then they tell them that they shouldn't be speaking on this topic and just stick to sports. And literally both sides do this. It's not just, Laura Ingraham did it and it kind of got blown up because she told LeBron that. But it happens when anybody speaks about something that another group disagrees with. And you just have to be able to, defend your position and explain, how you got to the point of, your position. Now, it's fine for somebody to disagree with that. And people always say, it's always interesting, people say, I don't always agree with you, but I definitely respect you and I definitely everything. And it's a weird kind of compliment to have because people kind of always throw that in there, but it means that somebody can respect how you got to your position, even if they disagree with the conclusion. And I think that's important to be able to, to make somebody understand how you got to the point that you're at.
But it is that difficult now because it seems like back in the day when you were at Syracuse, people are a little bit more civil and able to listen and try to understand before trying to be understood. But in 2022, right, it's just a little bit different where people are not as civil as they once were. How do you overcome that? Because there are some people out there who can be violent, who can, no matter what you say, they're going to believe a lie before they believe the truth. So the rules of engagement, I should say, has changed from the 90s to where it is today. Talk to the young people about the rules of engagement now and how you can still be effective in this day and time.
So one of the things that I had the opportunity to do in my book, We Matter, Athletes and Activism, was I had the chance to be able to interview a lot of the people who I grew up admiring and reading about. So I interviewed Kareem, I interviewed Bill Russell before he passed. I interviewed Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and Craig Hodges and Layla Ali and Malcolm X's daughter, like all these different people who I have admired. And, one of the things that I see a common thread is they all were misrepresented at one time or another, throughout their lives, especially when they were younger. Now, the difference now is, it's funny, I was just talking to John Carlos, because I interviewed him after Bill Russell passed. But I interviewed him for my book as well. And he always says how much he wishes that they had social media back then. Because then he didn't have to wait for a reporter to tell his story and hope that the reporter tells it the right way. He could go to his own social media. So the way that like LeBron uses his social media, he can say what he wants to say. So if somebody tries to twist his words and, or say that you even see it right now, like an athlete will, after the game, they're in the heat of the moment, they ask them a question and think on the fly, like they say something, but they can go clarify on their own social media and say, okay, I know I said that, but this is what I meant. And then make it abundantly clear. So, I mean, like, imagine if Muhammad Ali had a Twitter account. You know what I mean? Like what he would have done with that, what he would have done with Instagram. Like, can you imagine him on TikTok saying something every time? Like he wants to, like that's that. So young people now have a power that we didn't have back in the day. And so being able to articulate your position or make your position plain, especially if you're being misrepresented, you have the ability to do that now in a way that, athletes in the past wish they had, if that makes sense.
Wow, it does. This is good. This is good. Hey, listen, we're getting ready to open it up for Q&A. So if you have a question, make sure you put it in the Q&A. And I see people are, they got some questions for you, Brother Thomas. They got some questions for you. So I just want to know, how can student athletes use their voices and notoriety to highlight equity and inclusion issues on campus? Talk about that. And why is it so important for student athletes to bring awareness to things like that?
Well, it's important because people listen to athletes. That's basically, in a nutshell, the same way I said back in high school, where the guys will come up to me and were thanking me for saying something. And just because I was an athlete, they listen. So you have a tremendous opportunity. So people always ask me, and they always have, I'll be on panels, whether it's on, Congressional Black Caucus or NAACP or something like that. And I'll be on a panel discussion with all these different, experts and scholars. And they'll ask me, the question at some point or another, should athletes be obligated to use their voices? And I was like, I don't like to use the word obligated. Because first of all, you have to have a certain passion about this in order to be able to effectively do it. If you don't have the passion, then maybe you shouldn't say anything, because you have to then defend yourself, and you have to maybe articulate yourself the right way, or they will make you look like you don't know what you're talking about, because the criticism is definitely going to come. So if you're not built for that, if you don't want that, now some people don't want that criticism. Some people don't want to be asked to defend themselves. Some people don't want, they're bothered by it, which is perfectly okay to have that position, because it's not for everybody. But if I would say that athletes have a tremendous opportunity, and as an athlete, you can affect change in a lot of different ways by using your voice. But again, it's not for everybody.
Gotcha. You are an author, so talk to me about the inspiration of the books that you wrote. Talk about that in the process for selecting the topics. Talk to me about that.
So I've written 5 books, and I just finished my 6th. I wrote a book with Emerald Gardner. This is the newest one. It'll be out in October. Emerald Gardner is the daughter of Eric Garner, and everybody knows that her father was killed by NYPD. And I kind of have been there with her throughout this whole journey. I actually interviewed her first with We Matter, a lot of years ago. And I first had this big panel discussion in New York when All-Star Weekend was there. And it was right after her father was killed. And I remember I asked her to come out. I invited her to the panel, but not to speak or anything like that. I just wanted her to feel the love from the audience and everything like that. And I said she didn't have to speak if she didn't want to. I was like, I won't even announce that you're here. And if you want to speak, you can. And she was so appreciative that she was like, wow, everybody has been trying to exploit me, put me on this thing and have me speak here and do this and do this. It's like, you're just saying I don't have to do any of that. I was like, well, not if you don't want to. If you want to, that's cool. But if not, you can sit there quietly and, just listen to the program. And so she spoke, and she decided to speak there and say something. And she just kind of said something brief and thanked the crowd for coming and things like that. And I gave her the standing ovation. And the face that she had when it was a standing ovation, she was like, wow, she was taken aback. And, and just working with her and working with other impacted families, and just encouraging them and supporting them. So with this last book, I told her story, her path to, trying to fight for justice for her father, how it took 5 years to get the cop even fired, and all what she pushing for the Eric Garner law to be put in place, and the role that she had to go through that, talking to different senators and getting, so all of the different family members, I have a real heart for them now. So now I'm using, my platform to elevate their voice and elevate their fight and to help them with their fight. So that's a long-winded answer of one of the books. But so each one has a different level of inspiration and a different topic. But that's really that, when you're blessed with a platform like I've been blessed with, you got to be a blessing to somebody else. So that's kind of where I am now.
That's good. And then one last question, then we're going to open it up for questions. So what has been the most rewarding for you in your activism work over the years?
Really, it's just working with the impacted family members, and and then expressing to me how thankful they are, and it's amazing. And if you read their stories, it's tough. It's tough with them. They lose their loved one, and there's this big media frenzy immediately when it happens, and it's a trending topic, and everybody is talking about it, and then all the cameras go away, all the attention goes away. You know what I mean? All the help and assistance goes away, and they're just left there after being in this whirlwind of being in a trending topic and having everybody wanting to pull for them and put them up and talk here and stand for this cause, and you have to do it this way and you have to say it this way. We had Botham Jean's sister, Alyssa Charles Finley. I interviewed her in Police Brutality and White Supremacy, and she was telling how a lot of people got upset with them because her brother, who was really in the verge after his brother, who was Botham Jean. I don't know if you know the case of Botham Jean, that there was an officer in Dallas, Texas, and that's the one where Amber Geiger was the officer's name, and she went into his apartment and she said she thought it was her apartment, and she shot him because she thought he was an intruder. And he was like sitting on his couch, eating ice cream, watching TV. And she like shot him like multiple times. And that's what happened to their family members. So the brother was almost having a complete breakdown. Like he had so much anger and rage. And if you remember it, in the courtroom, he hugged Amber Geiger. And I think he told her, you know, he had to forgive her or something like that. And all of this backlash came on the family because of that. And so she's talking to me. She was like, yeah, but you don't understand. He was literally about to go crazy. Like he was about to lose it completely. Like he hadn't spoken a word. Like he was built in, like about to explode. He's like, he needed to do that for him. So it's kind of just showing. And a lot of people didn't. So when people's reaction to that, they're like, oh, wow, we didn't know that that's what happened. That we don't know that that's why, you know, they just got upset. They're like, wait, how could he go and hug the cop? You know what I mean? They're sitting there tap dancing, using all these different terms. And, you know, the heat that their family, you know, started feeling from our community from that. So now you're dealing with this tragedy. Now you have people from our community who are upset with you, and you're trying to get justice for your loved one at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's telling those stories that a lot of people don't know. So it's, you know, it's just a passion. It's a
Gotcha.
passion of mine. Yeah.
Wow. Last question, yes or no? Should student athletes be role models? Yes or no?
I think I can't say yes or no. So I got to say it this way.
Okay.
You are a role model whether you want to be or not.
Okay.
So you're either going to be a positive role model or a negative role model, but people are going to look at you because you're an athlete. That's just the way that it is.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yamil writes, and we have some questions. So, you know, yeah. Was it difficult to do basketball and school at the same time?
Of course.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, you're traveling, you know, I'm playing against, you know, rivals like Georgetown and Villanova and UConn. I'm all hyped up and everything like that. Then after the game, I got to get some rest because I got a biology test the next day. You know what I mean? Early in the morning, or I got to do some extra studying because I have to. And it's, you know, sometimes you get teachers that don't like you because, I'm not saying it's your school, I'm talking about my experience. But some
name the teachers. Who were those teachers back in Syracuse? Name them. I'm a call them up.
Listen, sometimes you get teachers that almost resent you because you're an athlete and you're getting attention, and they think that you want special attention because you had a game last night. You know what I mean? So they're extra hard on you. So that's what I had a lot. I was in school of management, and, you know, I was a business major. So that's what I dealt with quite often. Then I was always speaking on different things. So, you know, I had that as well. But
gotcha. Rebecca writes, what was the hardest obstacle you had to overcome?
The hardest obstacle I had to overcome. Ooh, that's a good one. I would say that you had to have self-control in instances where it would have been very understandable for you to lose self-control. That's the hardest part for me. You know what I mean? Like I said, like going back from the police, it would have been very understandable for me to go off on every single one of those policemen at that time. But I had to recognize who had the power in the situation. So, and that was a winningless battle. Like I wasn't going to win that battle if I did that. You know, so looking at how to win the bigger war and having to win the bigger war, I read a lot of the Art of War, Sun Tzu. I don't know if y'all know anything about that, but it's, you know, going back and putting them on blast and writing about it and talking about it and making it, you know what I mean? But I wasn't going to win the battle right there. So that was a difficult part. Like I said, I alluded to it, but those kind of instances happened all the time when I was in high school. I found myself in those kind of situations, and I just had to learn how to, you know, focus on the bigger picture and not on the winningless battle.
Lanny Davis writes, did your anger over this event ever diminish into something like pity or inspiration?
So sometimes with a lot, you know, telling that story to different audiences, you have different reactions. And you have some of the reactions where it is pity. That's the response from it. And it's like, okay, now let's change this pity to how can we change things so that this doesn't happen all the time. You have some people who identify with it. Some people learn from it. A lot of young, especially young Black males, they relate to it. I get feedback of people saying, you know what, I was stopped by the police and I swear I thought about what you said and I didn't go off on the cop either. You know what I mean? It probably saved my life. So you get different reactions from it, but yeah, I always get strong reactions when I tell this story though.
Gotcha. Shania writes, what was the second most significant event that has happened to you?
Let's see. Well, there's been a lot. I mean, so when I'll say this, when I was with the Wizards, I'm here in DC, and the war in Iraq happened. Now, right now, when you talk about the war in Iraq, everybody would be like, okay, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. We shouldn't have done that. But back then, right after September 11th, and George W. Bush was like, it's us against them. You know what I mean? And either you're with us or you're against us. And so I had my little brother, I had some of his friends that were enlisted in the army. And they were like, oh, wow, now I got to go to Iraq. And I was like, listening to him. And I was like, wait a minute, what does Iraq have to do with what happened on 9/11? What is the connection that you're making? So I'm listening to Bush saying, I'm like, wait, I don't understand. What does Iraq have to do with any of this? So then I started questioning it. And then I started being opposed to it. And then I started writing about it and performing different places all around DC. And I remember I'm playing for the Washington Wizards in DC, the nation's capital. So that's when I really learned how upset people get when they disagree with you. And I started getting, it's so fun, I'm dating myself because we didn't have social media then, but I started getting hate mail delivered to the Verizon Center, which was our practice. So I played with Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan came out of retirement, played 2 years. We were teammates, right? So every day he got these boxes of mail, right? Boxes of mail. I'll get like a letter or two from somebody from Syracuse or something like that. You know what I mean? But then after that, I started getting boxes. And most of them were hate mail. Like, how could you ungrateful athlete, you need to go back to Africa, you got this, all this thing. And I was like, wow, y'all are really upset because I'm not. So that was difficult because I had never felt backlash to that level. Like that was a whole different another level of backlash.
Wow. That's good. Ashton wants to know, when you talked about Syracuse and those review boards and things like that, were the student review boards equally represented?
No, there was a few students on the review board with everyone else, so they had a voice. There wasn't equal students and equals. That was something that they had to keep fighting for. So if you remember, a few years ago, right before COVID, there were these issues that happened in Syracuse, and they had this big protest there. And part of the protest was that those numbers had dwindled. So you have to keep on fighting. So when something happens, and I'm going back, I was like 2099 when we were fighting with that. Fast forward to 2020, 2019, they had one student on the review board. One, you know what I mean? And a lot of times they were handpicked by the campus security. So as you can understand, if they're handpicked, they're going to usually side with them. So that was a whole different thing that they had to, continue to fight for. But yeah, that's the answer to your question.
Okay. Annalie writes, how has previously being in the NBA helped you use your voice to express your feelings and thoughts to the world? And were there any times you felt you should not have said anything?
Well, I didn't feel like I shouldn't have said anything. I think with the backlash with the war, I was just kind of shocked by how upset everybody was, and it was like strong backlash. But when you're an athlete, NBA, college, high school, you have a certain access to the media that regular students don't have, regular people don't have. Like I could say something to the media or talk to the media and get it in the Washington Post or the Washington Times, or like when I was in Tulsa, in the Tulsa World. So that's just another, like I said, that's an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity that you have to be able to bring to light something that might not have been brought to light without you doing that.
Yeah. This is from an anonymous attendee. You talked about the inspiration you drew from Malcolm X, and I guess they say they recognized the former President Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land, on the shelf behind you.
Some good
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah, I guess they do have good eyes. So they want to know what other literature or pieces of writing sparked your curiosity or shaped your perspective of advocacy throughout your life, and anything more recently.
Wow. Well, there's been a lot. Let's see, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander. That was a great book. I read a lot of Nathan McCall when I was younger. I think his book was called Make Me Want to Holler. Really good book. Sister Soldier had a book, No Disrespect. I remember I read that in college. That was early college. There's a lot that I like to read autobiographies because I like to see where they started and how they transitioned to who they were. I was always, and it's so funny, like I'll tell like people around me, they was like, yeah, that doesn't sound interesting at all. I was like, that's what I was into. So I like to read about people's stories, and even reading in, former President Obama, his story. And he had to make choices. We could have easily not have ever heard of President Obama. You know what I mean? He talks about it in his book. So I drew a lot of inspiration from that. And going back to what I was saying about the book We Matter, I read all of their autobiographies. You know what I mean? Like all of them. And it was just such an honor to be able to interview so many of them. But
yeah. Gotcha. Good. Logan writes, how was it transitioning from sports to full-time activist speaking out on issues?
Well, it was kind of something that I always did since middle school. So I was always kind of doing both the whole time. So I was writing, I started writing pretty much as soon as I got into the league. I started writing, wrote my first book, which was, and it wasn't necessarily a big transition because I was already doing it. I think one of the times something that a lot of athletes struggle with is when they have nothing else that they're passionate about, and then they stop playing, because you're going to stop playing eventually at some point. Every athlete, it comes to an end after a while, and then it's just like, what do you do once it does come to an end, whenever that point is? And if you don't have something else that you're passionate about, that's where you see a lot of guys, feel kind of lost and not knowing where, because sports, when you're training, when you have a routine, it takes up a lot of time. You know what I mean? You have a routine of training, like it's something that you're doing, you know what I mean? And then when that's not there anymore, you have to find something else that you're passionate about.
Gotcha. We want to wrap up. We want to be conscious of your time. We want to wrap up by 8:15, and we have about a dozen questions to go.
I'll do it quicker. I'll answer quicker.
Okay, we'll do the lightning round, the lightning round with brother Etan Thomas, right? Daquan wants to know, I would like to ask, what was your biggest challenge as you were becoming who you are today?
One of the biggest challenges was just being able to balance everything. You have to, because then I became a father. I wrote a book about fatherhood, and I grew up in a single parent household. I had a relationship with my father. Saw him on visitations, but he wasn't actually in the house. And there is a difference. So I wrote about that dynamic, and then now learning how to be a father when you didn't necessarily have a father in your home. And then dealing with one child. Then, my first son, Malcolm, was born, and then I had, figuring out how to do him, how to talk to him, and everything like that. Then you have the second child, and then everything you did with the first child doesn't work anymore. So you have to learn all over again. But it's a great journey though. But that's how it answers that question.
Yeah, I know you talked about the hate mail, but Peyton wants to know, ever felt harassment or underlying racism from fans while playing, like when we saw in Boston 2 years ago with the fan throwing a bottle at Kyrie, or the fan spitting on Trae Young in New York? Did you ever experience that when you were playing in the NBA?
Yeah, I actually wrote about it after the incident happened with the Duke volleyball team.
That they say didn't happen, that BYU says didn't happen. Like, go ahead.
Man, they said it happened. They just didn't have no footage of it, but it was you know, I've experienced that actually in Utah plenty of times, and I wrote about it. I wrote about it when Russell Westbrook. I almost got into it with a fan a couple years ago, and I was like, yeah, I remember that happening in Utah. And you know, and that's where you have those, because I learned about, you know, what Bill Russell and them went through every single game. You know, what Kareem and them went through every single game, and how they had to have self-control literally every single game. It happened every blue moon with me while I was playing, but for them it was every night. So that's what, you know, you learn how you can't just lose it every time that it happens. But yeah, I definitely didn't experience that.
Got you. Andrew wants to know, how can athletes change the culture of a team if the environment is not benefiting the organization?
If the environment is not benefiting the organization, let me see what that means. Let me see.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's saying how can, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So athletes have within the culture of the team, they're leaders, and leaders lead in different ways. There's different ways to lead. You know, just using basketball analogies, Kobe led a lot differently than LeBron led, a lot differently than, you know, MJ led. But they were all different leaders. And there's ways you can lead and influence your entire team. Also getting everybody on board and on the same page. So a good example, what's the movie with Denzel Washington when he goes to the football school and
Remember the Titans?
Remember the Titans. I would tell him to watch that, because that was a team that was completely in disarray. The environment didn't support, you know, the team, and they learned how to be able to actually work together as one unit. And people who were literally, the line was drawn in the sand. You over here, you over here. So that I would say that was a good move. That would be a good movie to watch.
Gotcha. Carl wants to know, what advice would you give to someone writing speeches and books on similar or the same topics as you have? What advice would you give them?
Read the people before you. Study and learn. That is the best way to be able to really fully, you know, understand different perspectives and really be educated on a certain topic. You know, one of the things that happened that I had to learn, I'll say this really quick, when I was younger, is you read one book and like, boom, okay, I know everything. My mom was like, no, you don't. Here, read this. You know what I mean? So that's what you have to just keep reading and learning how to perfect your craft.
One thing we didn't ask, what did you study at Syracuse? What did you get your degree in?
Business. School of management. Right. Business management.
Okay, then. All right. You talked briefly about a man being, what are your thoughts on the Sean Taylor incident from 2007, the botched robbery? Do you know about that story?
I have to think about that one for a minute.
Okay, then.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Let me see. So this is to Zur. So my question is, do you think the way we as a Black community create the kind of response we get based on how we act? For example, you said based on the way the officers looked at you, you just allowed them to search the trunk. Do you think if you had continued your argument of them not having a warrant, things would have went differently?
Yeah. You know, it's tough because I was just, you know, right after that, I'm learning more about the Panthers. And I had this thing where, you know, Huey P. Newton and the way that he would confront the police officers would hype me up. You know what I mean? And they were like, you know, I don't know if y'all saw the movie The Panther, because they showed it a little bit. They were like, y'all move along. He's like, we're not moving anywhere, pig. Like, and I was, you know, right. But I couldn't do that. You know what I mean? But that was the depiction in the movie. But knowing exactly what you can do, what you can't do, you know, or having the talk. So like my mother kind of helped say, okay, you don't have to do it quite like that, but you can still know your rights. You can still know what you can do, what you can't do. You present it in a different way. And I interviewed a few different police officers in my book to be able to walk through the way that you should respond in a situation when you're still protecting your rights. So there is a, you know, there's a method to it. But the thing that I had to grapple with was that I wanted to react like Huey P. Newton. That's what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? So there's a way that the first goal is to make sure that you get home safely. And you have to understand that that's goal number one.
Absolutely.
And there's ways you can make sure that you get home safely and be able to stand up for your rights at the same time.
Ashton wants to know, have you ever had an injury that required therapy or rehabilitation? And if so, what is the best way a physical or occupational therapist can support student athletes?
So therapy and injury, every athlete goes through it, and at some point or another. And it's a matter of, you have to be mentally strong, because it's easy to get discouraged when you're injured. And being injured sucks. You know what I mean? You can't play. You got to do all this rehab, but you can't play. You got to do all, it does suck. But being able to have the discipline to go through all the rehab and to not go out there before you're ready. And that's a big thing that I have. If you see the different things that I talk about, I'm really strongly against organizations putting athletes out there hurt and injured. I was here with RG3. So anybody that knows who RG3 and what happened with him, well, he was about to be bigger than life. And then he played injured, and his whole career went downhill from there. And then nobody took responsibility. The doctors, the team, we don't know. We didn't know. I was like, wait a minute. Nobody's going to take responsibility for putting him out there. He's like limping on the field, but it's you have to be able to protect yourself, because there's going to be a time where, someone tries to pressure you, by someone, I mean, coach or something like that, or fans or something, to try to go out there before you're ready. And that's something that I'm just vehemently against.
Gotcha. Cameron wants to know, would you go back and change your past or anything about your past if you had the chance?
Well, when you reflect, there's definitely a lot of things where you're like, if I knew then what I know now, and any adult would say that, because you just have more wisdom and you learn from your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but if you don't learn from your mistakes, then it's kind of a waste. But you should learn from all of your mistakes that you've made.
Absolutely. Brianna writes, you're so calm, cool, and collected. Brianna wants to know, did you ever get angry, and did you ever lash out? Did you ever lash out?
Of course. Like what I told you, everybody, my family's from the Caribbean, from Grenada, and my grandmother would have a saying that everybody has their own bag of rocks to carry. So my bag of rocks was being able to control that and control the anger, especially in a situation where I am justified in being angry about. You know what I mean? When you got a reason to be hostile. Like, this person deserves getting your wrath right now. And that was always what I had to grapple with, is being able to have self-control.
Michael wants to know, what do you think about NBA players or other athletes who refuse to talk about social issues despite their platforms? Because you have some NBA people who say, I'm not talking about that.
Well, that's the thing, though. It's not for everybody. And somebody, if it's not their thing, I can't force it to be their thing, because then it's going to show. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have a certain passion about it, because you have to, like Coach Bayon told me, you have to be able to and willing to defend yourself and defend your position. If you don't have that, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just saying something, could make things worse, because then they're going to make you look like a buffoon. And then that's going to hurt the credibility, of other athletes, because that's just the way that it works.
Yeah. Anonymous, what's one book that you've written that you would recommend students to read, or recommend the people who are listening to read?
We Matter, Athletes and Activism. You said that I've written, or that I've read?
That you've written, that you would recommend them to read.
I would definitely recommend We Matter, Athletes and Activism. You hear a lot of different voices. I interviewed a lot of different people, a lot of different conversations, and you hear people's journey and their reasons for speaking up the way that they do, from past and to current players. So I recommend that.
Gotcha. And then Trevor asks, how did you cope with having hate cast upon you, even though you're a good person? And they say, by the way, how was it playing with Michael Jordan?
No, okay. Well, the hate casted upon you is something that you can't really get around. My mom would, this is just a saying, my mom would always say, well, look, they hated on Jesus and he was Jesus, so they gonna hate on you too. You know what I mean? That was like my mom's saying. Like, she said it all the time. Like, if I would say, oh man, these people talk about, they talked about Jesus too, they're gonna ahead and talk about you too. That was like her thing. Now, playing with MJ was amazing. It's MJ. You know what I mean? It's Michael Jordan. So it's like playing. Have you seen those images of Michael Jackson when he would like come to a place and there would be all these fans like, ah, you see people like pass out or people like crying for no reason. That's how it was with MJ. It was the craziest thing. And so that was my first years in the league. So I remember, I'll tell this real quick. I remember we landed and we went to someplace. I don't remember where we were, but there was all these people, like flashes, everything like that, people all over the place, yelling stuff like that. And I was like, wow, is this how the NBA is? And Christian Laettner was next to me. He was like, they're here for MJ, not for us. Don't get it twisted, young fella. This is MJ's fans. But it was absolutely, amazing. Who could say that they played with, one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to wrap it up. I'm sorry I could not get to all the questions, but I just want to wrap it up. Your 30-second pitch to the students. What would you tell them? What will be your parting words to the students as they can use their voice to make a difference and, continue on, not even when they leave college, that they can still use their voice? What would be your advice and what would be your 30-second pitch to them?
That you're in a great time where you're learning to find your voice, and I would encourage you to stand up for what you believe in, no matter what that is. There's not a certain box that you have to be in, or speak about this if this is your thing. No, speak about what's important to you, and what's important to you might not be what's important to somebody else, but you still have to stay true to yourself. And it's important to you, then you speak on it, then you stand up for it. Then you try to get other people on board. Then you try to have strength in numbers. Then you try to, do all of that things. But I can't, express enough how important it is to stand up for what you believe in, because you can't wait for somebody else to speak for you. Sometimes you got to advocate for yourself, and that's a special time that you're in where y'all could really learn how to do that. That would be my quick pitch.
All right. Well, thank you, brother Etan Thomas. I'm gonna turn it back over to Miss McLevin.
No problem. We want to thank everybody for joining. So before you exit, we're going to give you the assessment quiz that you need to complete to get credit for this Lyceum. Mr. Etan Thomas, we thank you so much for your reflections and for sharing your testimonies and your stories. Mr. Dedrick, as always, we love your moderating. We love your energy as well. Thank you, Dr. Antonio Jefferson and the Unity House for bringing this all together. Again, students, make sure you stay on so that you can get the link. We're going to drop it in the chat box. Make sure you complete it. And then afterwards, you can exit the presentation. I want to thank everybody for your cooperation and have a good night.
All right. Thanks for everybody for listening.